thank you to the four of you who have agreed to be part of the panel today. We have Damien, we have Terry, we have Jeff Nally, and we have Will Fisher. And they each are part of this panel and coming from different points of experience. And so if we could start down our virtual table with Damien and then go to Terry and Jeff and finally Will. And if each of you could talk a little bit about how you fit into the whole conversation around coaching supervision and just a very brief introduction of who you are. And Damien, if you could start, please.
Okay, so I am using my telephone to speak. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, thank you.
I hear too much echo here. Let's see if we can make it happen. So using my phone for the voice. So basically my background, I have been an executive coach for many years, and I was a volunteer member of the board of directors of ICF. So basically what I was saying is that I was in the board of directors of the International Coach Federation, and we were having conversations about what should be the role of coaching supervision for the profession. Because in Europe, the European Mentor and Coaching Council make it mandatory for all of the coaches to go through coaching supervision. So we started having conversations in the board of directors if we wanted to have that or not at the global level. And when we were having the conversations, I didn't have enough information, so I decided to go and get trained as a coach supervisor. And then I fall in love with coaching supervision because I realized that it gives a space for all coaches to reflect on the practice and to look at our blind spots. So I do believe that coaching supervision gives us an opportunity to reflect on the work that we are doing. And if we do not have that space, we may not be as effective as we believe we are. And particularly for coaches who are starting, if they don't have an opportunity to keep learning and growing and getting feedback or discussing or exploring what they are doing, I do believe that there is a possibility that they are not providing the best possible service. So with that in mind, I started creating opportunities in Latin America, and I had my first coaching supervision training to train supervisors in Spanish in Latin America a couple of years ago. And this year I was hired by CoachSource, who has a big network of coaches all over the world. And Jeff Nally, who is here with us today, he's one of the managers for the coach for this network. And also participating in the program with Terry. And they have the goal to train supervisors because they wanted to have also competitive advantage when they were selling their coaching services. So the idea is that if coaches also receive supervision, the quality of the services could be even better. So with that, I had the first coaching supervision certification in English at CoachSource this year. And now I am starting next week the first virtual program. So I'm going to be training supervisors virtually worldwide. And there are people from more than 9 countries participating, what is really exciting. So this is what I want to say for now.
Okay, thank you, Damien. As always, you're on the forefront of things. If we could move to Terry Hildebrand. Where do you fit into the supervision conversation, Terry? And a brief introduction, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of you know me, but I'm also an executive and leadership coach, and I've been doing this work for about 20 years. And I first heard about supervision through Damien. He presented on it, I think about 3 years ago at the Gay Coaches Conference at Easton. And I was immediately excited about it and really didn't know where to go with it for a couple of years. And then last year, Damien reached out and said, hey, we're going to be doing this CoachSource supervision training. Do you want to join us? And I said, yes, of course. So I signed up for his program probably November, December of last year. And we started in January. That's where I met Jeff as well for the first time. And I got immediately excited about supervision. It's something that really has taken my own coaching to the next level because I've received a lot of supervision during the triad practices for the program, as well as hired my own supervisor who's highly trained and an experienced executive coach as well. So I've gotten a lot of personal benefit and also seen a lot of my own supervisees, as they're called, people that I'm supervising, receive a lot of benefit from supervision. I've also, kind of changed the name of it. I call it Super Dash Vision because it's really not about managing other coaches, which, we traditionally think of supervision as about control, but it's not that at all. It's completely about really supporting coaches to have a bigger vision, right? So it's the supervision or more perspective on their own clients and their own coaching. So I'm excited to be able to talk about it more today.
Well, thank you, Terry. And another individual who I know is always looking for, what's new and what's effective and what's interesting. So thank you for adding your voice to this panel. Jeff Nally.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jeff Nally, and I'm an executive coach. And I'm a coach supervisor as well. I've been coaching for 11 years. I started the coaching practice at Humana, a health insurance and well-being company. I led the coaching practice. I coached senior executives. I brought in external coaches. And back in 2010, after our coaching practice had been up for about 5 years, I ran into some folks at a coaching conference, and I said, "So what's new? What's next in coaching?" And they said, "We're really doing coaching supervision now," as Damian said. It was big in Europe, and so now we're trying to give coaches another deeper level of self-reflection about their clients, about coaching situations they happen to be in, not about their coaching skill, because they're already skilled professional coaches. And I thought, that sounds great. Well, Humana, my employer, was not interested in having us as internal coaches supervised or go through that experience. And I thought, one day I'm going to do this. So I left the Humana, started my own firm, speaking professionally about the neuroscience of coaching and leadership and doing executive coaching as well. And I wanted to add coaching supervision to what I offer to coaches. So when I do some work for Coach Source as well. I'm an engagement manager that helps place coaches inside companies across the globe. And I also coach for Coach Source. So they place me in companies to coach. And when Coach Source said, we're going to put together this class, does anybody want to learn how to be a supervisor and get supervised at the same time? I was thrilled. I'd been waiting for this for 7 years, So I made the investment, and I'm in the class with Terry. Damian is our instructor. I have 10 coaching supervision clients that I'm about to finish up as part of our training and our experience. And I'm really, really pleased with what I have learned and what I've been able to do as a coach with my own supervisor. So it is what's next for coaches in North America in particular. And I'm looking forward to talking more about it today.
Well, thank you for being part of the panel, Jeff, and for bringing your experience and the enthusiasm that you have for supervision. So welcome. And finally, the last member of the panel is Will Fisher.
Hi, folks. My name is Will Fisher, and I am a new coach who recently relocated to San Diego, California. And I'm in the process of getting my coaching practice developed and building it. And I am a student of Damian's. I was in the LGBT coach training program in Easton Mountain, and also a supervisee of Terry Hildebrand. And I'm very grateful to have been able to receive supervision and to have profited from its impact. And it was an incredible experience, and I'm excited to be able to chat with you all about it today.
So thank you, Will. Appreciate you being part of the panel and for adding the voice of, somebody who's actively engaged as a supervisee at this point. So
thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start with this. So we've heard a little bit about what supervision is. Why don't we just quickly go down the table, starting with Damian, and same order as before. And if each of you can tell us a little bit about what is supervision in the coaching model, please, as opposed to therapy or whatever else we might have a supervision model.
Okay, so the idea is that in terms of supervision, there are different models. I really like one that is that we use, that we say that coaching supervision have 3 different functions: formative, normative, and supportive. So formative is because in coaching supervision, you keep learning and developing skills. So you keep learning about new models, new theories, new tools. So every day you enhance the work that you're doing. And that's the reason why I love coaching supervision, because most coaches, we love learning. So this gives me the opportunity to keep learning. So as a supervisor, I have two supervisors that I work with. One that supervises me as a coach and one that supervises me as a supervisor, because these are two different activities. So this is the place where I also keep learning and makes me more effective to teach and train coaches and supervisors. And then the other function, other than the formative, is the normative. And here is more related about ethical issues, where many times coaches may not know that they are breaking some ethical or legal standards. So in that way, we can have conversations, we can explore how issues can be challenging, like, for example, around confidentiality in organizations. And then the third one is supportive. Our job as coaches many times is very lonely. So we can be by our own without having the opportunity to talk to other people and reflect on some of our challenges. So the supervisor gives an opportunity to reflect and explore what are our reactions to what happened to our clients, what are our emotions, what happened when we're identifying with our clients and dealing with situations similar to our own, or when we have issues that the clients are bringing and we feel stuck, or the client is stuck and something is not working, and we need a third person to help us to look at what's going on. So as Terry said before, supervision is like we look at the situation from a distance and we try to explore what's going on. And when we do that, usually I like to work with a model called the 7I model. And the 7I model is a model that people learn in the program that I train, and it's from Hawkins. And the 7I model from Hawkins explore I explore a different variable in the coaching supervision. One is the relationship between the client and the coach, what's happening the first one is who is the client, who is the client, where it's coming from, what are the challenges, what is the coaching agreement. The second one is interventions, what the coach is doing. Number 3 is the relationship. What is the relationship between the coach and the client? And this is all the system between the coach and the client. And then there is a system between the coach and the supervisor. And between the coach and the supervisor, number 4 is the coach. What's happening to the coach? What are their own emotions, their own challenges? What's happening to the coach working with the client? Number 5 is parallel processes. How many times the dynamics and what happened during supervision is similar to what happened during the coaching session. Number 6 is the countertransference. It's what the idea is what happens to the supervisor working with the coach. What are their own reactions? And number 7 is the context. What's happening outside the coaching supervision relationship and how that is impacting the relationship. So we use a lot this model. Like when I train coaches, I use the ICF core competency model, and to train supervisors, we use the core this 7I model to understand the dynamics.
Okay, thank you. Terry Hildebrand, how would you define supervision to someone? You already gave the distinction that it's supervision. Can you elaborate on that a little bit and give us your definition, please?
Absolutely. Well, supervision is really a reflective conversation where a supervisor holds space in a confidential, private, really supportive environment for a coach to explore, number one, what's going on with their clients, maybe also deal with tough issues that might be coming up. One of the things that I found most helpful in supervision is, we all run into clients that can cause us to have headaches or maybe run out of ideas where we need a fresh set of eyes to look at it. So early on, I got a lot of help with that to really examine, what interventions might be useful, get some new creative ideas. And then also they can examine their own thinking. We as coaches have blind spots just like everyone else. And you don't know what you don't know, but a supervisor often will see those blind spots and recognize patterns. Because as supervisors, we get trained in a lot of different methodologies. In addition to the 7I model that Damian talked about, there is, the concept of transactional analysis, which is psychological theory that helps people understand ego states and what might be going on between you and your client and even with your supervisor. There's transference, countertransference, there's Gestalt theory, there's human development theory. So you can apply a lot of these other theories that you can learn when you become a supervisor to help a coach maybe see things that they haven't seen before. One of the most interesting things that kept coming up for me and when I'm supervising others is what is called parallel process, right? And parallel process is this pattern that happens over and over that as coaches we sometimes are blind to. But as a supervisor, you can immediately sometimes see those patterns because, right, you have a different perspective, right? So that's what supervision is really is helping you get a broader perspective.
Well, thank you, and I definitely want to come back to a couple of those things and follow up on some of those ideas. Jeff Nally, how do you define supervision?
Great, thanks.
And maybe a little bit about how it functions in the executive environment where you're actually within an organization.
Sure. I'll use some comparisons and contrasts because this seems to help me and some of my supervision clients figure out what supervision really is when you're trying to tell them what it is. So, in coach training, we learn a lot of coaching skills. We learn how to demonstrate the competencies through ICF, and we learn how to use inquiry and questions to help people have insights and move forward. As coaches, we develop ourselves through continuing ed, right? We have continuing education units, and they can be any kind of training around being a coach, the skill of coaching, or even the running the business of a coach, etc. What we're missing as coaches, especially in North America and some other places where coaching supervision hasn't really taken a hold yet, is a private, confidential space to reflect on who we are as a coach, to bring a client situation or a coaching scenario, a live case to our supervision session with our supervisor and talk about what surprised us as a coach, what we weren't sure went well, things that we question about how we've been coaching, and more importantly, to use that supervisor to have a professional peer exchange where we are allowed to share our own experiences and to share what we know and to share what we've learned and to be complementary coaches in the moment. So we go way above that coaching skill. We go way above mentoring, which is about giving feedback to a coach about whether their coaching skill is meeting the competencies or not. Now we're into what's going on with your clients. What's your own reflection on that? How can I help you, and what do I know, and maybe how do I connect with what you're sharing? And we have a professional peer exchange as professional peers. And now, as I come out of coaching supervision sessions, now the result is really more who I am being as a coach, not just what I'm doing as a coach. So having coached executives as an internal coach inside companies, I know that there are lots of some organizations, mostly large, that will hire external firms with coach supervisors to be a supervisor for each of their coaches. The European Mentoring and Coaching Council recommends that you have 1 hour of coach supervision for every 32 or 35 hours of coaching that you do with clients. So about 1 hour a quarter, maybe. I've been supervising clients, as Terry has, with my supervision clients about 1 hour every 2 weeks. And that cadence seems to be helpful. My supervisor and I actually have a session about once every month. And that's really been helpful as well. So whether you're an internal coach or a private practice coach, the notion that we do not get confidential space to reflect deeply about who we are as a coach, to bring a case or a situation or a scenario, to have someone help us use supervision, and I've been using Terry's words and phraseology for the past several months, it tends to resonate. And then to have a professional peer exchange with someone who is also a professional, experienced coach. It's our next level of deep development as coaches that we're just now tapping into. If you're outside Europe or Australia or New Zealand or some other places where it's really taken hold.
Thank you. That's some great information. And finally, Will, from your experience as a new coach, how would you describe supervision?
You know, as a new coach, so much of what I received from my supervision was simply having someone else in the world of my coaching. I feel like oftentimes for coaches, we are in our own vacuum. We are isolated. We have these conversations with people that might be life transforming for them or not. And we finish these conversations, we're kind of like, oh, did I nail that or did I really fuck it up? And you're kind of left not knowing and perhaps a little insecure or feeling really great about it, but wanting to share it with someone. And so coaching supervision for me was about having that opportunity to share and reflect and to question and to explore and to discover with someone who has incredible skills. I mean, I was so grateful and blessed to have Terry, who I've always admired and looked up to and consider a mentor. But to have the opportunity to be in that exploratory space with someone and not just alone in your own little coaching bubble was how I received it. And yeah, I feel like as a new coach, I thought when I first heard of the opportunity to receive some supervision, maybe I was too early in my career, but it turned out to be the perfect time for me to have that kind of connection. And it made this first sort of phase of my coaching career that much more supportive.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you have had some great experience around being a client or supervisee, I guess. Before we go back down, Will, tell me a little bit about how the process works with you and your supervisor. You know, what does that normally look like on any given session? How often? What do you bring to the session? Those type of things.
Sure. So we were meeting every couple weeks, sometimes every few weeks, and oftentimes what it would look like is as most coaching sessions look, where the client is asked what they want to work on, what they want to address. And so for me, a lot of that time between our sessions was thinking about what is going on for me as a coach, what type of issues are coming up with my coaching sessions with my clients, what are the areas that I may have blind spots or some insecurity or uncertainties around, and I would sort of gather those and then bring those to Terry to explore and discuss. The other thing that I found really refreshing about supervision was that it wasn't just a ICF coaching session. There were opportunities for me to ask questions and ask for advice and to get some of the resources that Terry holds. And that was really, really useful, especially in the place of my career. And yeah, some of the sessions for me were also just about gaining confidence in myself as a coach and really stepping into my full power and coaching self, to have it reflected back to me that the work that I was doing and that coaching in general is a powerful and beautiful tool that we have the opportunity to offer to folks. And I feel like that is something that I was especially hungry for, again, in this developing part of my career.
Thank you. That sounds incredibly supportive. Jeff Nally, so similar question, you know, what does a typical supervision session look like for you? Because if I understand correctly, you both take advantage of supervision as a coach and you offer supervision. So what do sessions typically look like? And one of the things that Will talked about is that supervision offers an opportunity for the supervisee to ask questions, which sort of takes it outside of the normal coaching model where a coach uses inquiry. And here it seems like there's a combination of mentoring and sharing of knowledge. And maybe you can expand on that idea a little bit, if you would, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably not as much mentoring as we know in terms of the formal definition of coach mentoring. I'm not really teaching people how to improve their coaching skill or connect it to a competency per se. Sometimes that comes up, but it usually stems from the client case. So I'll just use one that I brought to my supervisor recently. So a supervision session usually starts out with, how do you want to use the time? And we co-create it together. But it typically starts with me as the supervisee bringing a client case or a situation and sharing it really briefly with my supervisor. Not an entire story. This is not therapy. This is not all the detail. One that I brought forward once was, I'm coaching a CEO and his direct reports. And what I had experienced in the previous month was they seemed to be asking me and coaching to basically lead their strategic planning and to help them get together as a team, but they weren't giving me any permission space to do that. And I felt really constrained. So I brought that to my supervisor. And she was able to really ask questions about how she saw me feeling, how she saw me reacting. She was really looking at me through several lenses, not really focused on the CEO or the team necessarily, just me. And so she asked me if there was, so like, what would be a metaphor that you feel like you want to be for this team? Now that's a good coaching question, but it's a great supervision question because it's about me as a coach, not my client. And I said, I think I want to be like the Hubble telescope. I want to be reflecting what's really happening with the team and not be responsible for bringing them together and doing their strategic plan and making them friends. And then she brought forward, actually opened a book and a PowerPoint about the case study of the Hubble telescope. And we dove deeper into the metaphor. And she said, here's what I know from this documentary and this book I read about what they learned from the Hubble telescope. And so we kept making some comparisons and contrasts. And that deep reflection through the Hubble telescope discussion gave me literally a whole new orientation of who I am as the coach with this CEO and their team. We're 7 months later, and now the coaching is going swimmingly. They have found their way to become a team. I'm not in control of that. And they actually have a different party, a third party now leading their strategic planning. They just met yesterday to do things on their own without me there or their strategic planning partner. So that's an example of how the supervision session goes. I bring a case briefly. The supervisor shares what she's sensing, seeing, intuiting, and what I'm describing. We don't focus as much on the client necessarily. We can, but in this case she did. And she helped me dive deep on a metaphor. We can also use the 7I model that Damien and Terry described as well. So you can dance around that whole model. What's the organization telling you, Jeff, as a coach, that's helpful or not helpful here? What's coming up for you about the way that they're treating you that others may have treated you? What do you see your relationship as with them? Are you a parent or a teacher or a consultant or a coach or a guide? And how is that impacting how you're coaching them? Is that a description, an example that kind of resonates and gives you a view of what that session might look like?
Oh, definitely. Thank you. I particularly appreciate the example you shared around the Hubble telescope. And just the fact that, the woman that you were working with, oh, by the way, I happen to know a documentary. So then you dive even deeper into that model.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it certainly is something different than we experience, when we're working with just a coach. So it sounds like the model gives you some freedom to play and to really do things in a different way. So thank you for sharing that. Terry Hildebrand, how does sessions work with you when you work with folks? We heard a little bit about how they work on Will's side. Maybe you can offer some additional thoughts on what a session looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from my experience, there's been three major types. Probably the traditional supervision session, which has a lot of mileage to it in terms of growth and learning, is a case study, right? Where you're bringing a real life example of a real coachee that you're working with, and you use the 7-eyed model to really explore that coaching session that has happened, or maybe the larger relationship even with that particular client. And you know, I've done that a lot with my own supervisor, where I'm struggling with a particular client, they're pushing my buttons, or you know, I'm just, you know, not really where I want to be in terms of effectiveness. And my supervisor was able to point out different things or ask me different questions to see it from a slightly different perspective, or maybe even share her own experience, right? That's part of supervision, is sharing the supervisor's perspective. So that's where it might be a little different than traditional coaching, right? You bring in additional information that you might not in a traditional coaching model. So that's kind of type number one. Type number two in supervision is really more actually listening to a coaching call. I actually had one of my clients do that. She wanted me to hear one of her sessions because she didn't feel good about it, and she wanted a second opinion about how that went. And so it wasn't exactly mentor coaching, which would be me critiquing her ICF skills. It wasn't that. It was critiquing other things like the environment and what was the larger context, you know, and what was really happening in this call, and what were you trying to accomplish? What do you think the client was trying to accomplish? So it was a much more systemic view than you would probably do in a mentoring session. But I have listened to actual client calls of my supervisees. So you can give them, I think, a little bit of mentoring, but I think it's bigger than that, right? It's a larger systemic perspective. I think the third type of session, and I know, Will, you and I had, you know, some of these is more like what's going on for me personally, right? And it might not be a specific client case, but it's like, who am I as a coach right now, and where do I want to go with my coaching? And that can be a little bit different type of supervision. It's still the personal growth of the coach and trying to help them have a thinking partner to reflect on who they want to be and maybe even where they want to take their business. And I don't think I would do that for every single supervision session, but I think that it's a valuable form of supervision as well, to have a thinking partner to look at those larger issues of self.
Right, great. Thank you. I appreciate the three distinct, you know, views of looking at it. And I think that's really useful, that there are lots of different forms that this can actually take. And Damian, anything else you want to add to what does supervision look like?
So what I want to say that if you hear Terry talking, or even with Jeff and even Will, three of them, when they were talking about the supervisors, you could see how they were talking about them. Because one of the interesting pieces about supervision is the relationship between the coach and the supervisor. And these relationships sometimes are more intimate and closer than the coaching relationship. I think that the supervisor can make a meaningful contribution to the coach, as the coach can do a meaningful contribution to the life of our clients. The supervisor provides a meaningful contribution to the professional life of the coaches. So it's when you hear the respect and the admiration from Will towards Terry, or Terry and Jeff, when they were talking about the supervisor, for me it was great to hear that. It's like, and that is the same way that I feel with my supervisors. And I hope it's the same way that my supervisor is still working with me, is that this relationship makes a huge difference in how you show up and who you are working with your clients. So that's the reason why I recommend to people to work with a supervisor, because it's an opportunity to get that support, that reflective space, to make a bigger contribution to the work that you do with your clients, and also you enhance with your professional practice, also your life. It's like in coaching, you know, when we work with our clients, they are more effective as managers, but they are also more effective in their lives and how they live their lives. So my invitation is for people who have never considered supervision before to try it, to have an experience, because you don't know what you don't know. And I hope today with this panel we could go and bring some new light to people who are not very familiarized with the concept and idea of coaching supervision.
Well, I don't know about anybody else, but the four of you have really created an interest and an enthusiasm on my part to look into supervision. And I think that leads us to the next question. I mean, why don't you start and we'll go back the other direction. What do I look for when I'm looking for a supervisor coach? How and where?
Great question. What, according to ICF, the International Coach Federation, coaching supervision is not a requirement like for the European Mentor and Coaching Council, but they suggest that people that look for a supervisor look for somebody who is trained as a supervisor. So many people think because I am a coach and I have been coaching for a long time, I can be a supervisor. My suggestion is that if you're going to be looking for a supervisor, be sure that the person is trained, have the skills to be able to do the job. And I think that's number one. And number two, people have different, they need and want different things. So you want to be sure that the supervisor is a good match for you. So my recommendation would be to be sure that when you are going to be working with a supervisor, you interview the person. Maybe you interview 2 or 3 people and you choose one, like in that many times the philosophy from ICF. The philosophy in coaching is if you're going to look for a coach, interview 2 or 3 people before you choose one coach. In supervision, it's similar. Before you go and look for a supervisor, you may want to interview 2 people or 3 and get a sense of how they work, what models they use, what is the philosophy of supervision and coaching. So we suggest people to ask these questions when you are looking for a supervisor. If they are trained, what is their philosophy, how do they work, and clarify expectations. I think these are good questions to start.
Great. Thank you. Terry, where do I find supervisor coach? Where do I find a supervisor?
Well, there is a approved list of supervisors on the European Mentoring and Coaching Council website, and those people are certified and trained. But given how new this model is, especially in North America, probably where I would go personally is to Damian, because he's trained probably more people in North America than anyone else. And so ask him for his list of people who've graduated from his program. There are other trainers of supervisors in North America, but there's only 2 that I know of. Maybe Damian can add his perspective here, but I think there's only 2 programs in America that are training supervisors at the moment.
So you have a guy and your guy is Damian. Thank you. Along those same lines, Will, are you still with us or did you drop off?
Yeah, I have to leave very soon, but yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so quick question. So how did you decide, what went into your decision to hire a supervisor? And then when you finish the question, just anything else you think you'd like to add to the conversation before you take off?
Sure. I mean, it just seemed like a great opportunity. To reflect back on the previous question of how you decide who to work with, I like to work with people who are successful. So, working with Damian was a no-brainer, and working with Terry was a no-brainer. They're both at the top of their game as coaches, and so I was immediately drawn towards them and wanted to study under them, and in the case of Terry, to be supervised by him. But I suppose in addition to that is looking for someone whom you can trust and whom you can step into your vulnerability with, and to feel comfortable doing that, I think is very important too. So for me, deciding to do it was a no-brainer because it was such a great opportunity to work with someone that I already respected and wanted to create a deeper relationship with. And it really had such incredible impact on me. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity, and I absolutely recommend supervision to any coach who has that opportunity as well. And yeah, I don't really have much else to add. If anyone has a question, I'd be happy to take it, but otherwise I'm gonna sneak off to a meeting.
So anybody have a quick question for Will before he takes off?
I have a question for Will. I don't know if this relates, but I'm just curious because you moved to a very different area. Any insights as to how you're building your practice in a totally new geographic or totally new place, just or if supervision is helping you with that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say one of the most valuable supervision sessions that I had was our final session, which for me was ended up being a thinking partnership around my business, around my practice, and around my niche. And we were able to brainstorm in a really productive way. We were able to really nail down the name of the website. You know, I had all these ideas, but I needed someone to really like bounce these ideas with, someone from the industry who had knowledge. And so that was really useful to get some of that really established before I landed here. And then in terms of relocating, it's just been a matter of connecting with local coaches, right? So I've been able to find some local gay coaches, some coaches who coach, you know, blocks away from me. And I found a lot of that through Google, good old Google. But yeah, you know, I think that it's really helpful to have a network, and I was worried about leaving the East Coast and leaving my network, because most of you are based out there, but we're everywhere. So, and I've managed to find some. Anyways, I love and miss you all, and I wish you well, and we'll see each other soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Will, for being part of the conversation today.
Thank you.
So while we have the floor open, is there anybody else that has a question for anyone who is part of the panel today before we, I've got a couple of other questions I'd like to get to, but if you have a question right now, let's get it out there and get that answered. Okay, so if there aren't any questions, then Jeff, so one of the things that Will mentioned was that this is a very intimate relationship, that there is a lot of vulnerability between, particularly on the part of the supervisee. You kind of just lay it all out there. What's necessary for someone to prepare themselves to be a good supervisee so that they can have the vulnerability that they need, so that they can really take advantage of supervising situations?
Yeah, I think it's just a couple of basic things, but it's different from most all the other type of coach-client or coach-training relationships we have. The first is be willing to share with your coach what you're thinking, what you're feeling, with your supervisor, sorry, what you are thinking and what you are feeling and what you are experiencing and how you see or perceive or think you are being as a coach. A lot of my supervisees started with a lot of information about the case or talking about the client and other things instead of really coming ready to reflect about themselves. And so that took a lot of heavy lifting, but after a while they got the feel for it and they came right in with, here's how I think I'm showing up as a coach, but I'm not really sure if that's useful. So being willing to do that. And then second, while it is an intimate relationship, it is co-created. So I don't think you have to put a potential supervisor through a lot of interviews. You can have maybe a free 30-minute session with them and ask them to supervise and see what it feels like. But if the coach comes willing to go into deep reflection and to be vulnerable and to share, then a trained professional certified supervisor will be awesome, even though you're not alike at all or you don't have a lot of connections. My supervisor is a woman who lives in Rio de Janeiro. We have nothing in common at all except that we're coaches, and she's and we were matched just by Damien, so we had no prep work together one-on-one at all. It has been phenomenal. So again, it's kind of similar to the coach-client relationship. What we craft together and what the expectations are makes the relationship great. It doesn't mean that your supervisor has to be like me or like you or really be in a deep relationship with you to begin with. As a matter of fact, I think it's better if you're not. You're co-creating a new type of reflection space. And there's no better place to do that than with a professional certified supervisor.
Great, thank you. Terry, similar question. So it may not be about preparation, and it may not be about spending an enormous amount of time trying to find the exact right coach, but it does sound like there is a mindset that's important for those who want to take benefit of supervision, and that's about switching the focus for at least a period of time to yourself as a coach and how you actually are in the world. How does one go about doing that, or what do you think is useful to prepare that way?
Right. So I think the two things that I think really make it work. One is you have to be willing to reflect, right? So, the good news is most coaches already have that skill, right? If you've gone through a formal coach training program, which, most supervisees have, you already have that skill, but it's about willing to really spend time on yourself. Because, a lot of times we're so focused on others, right? Helping our clients and other people in our lives, that this is a really opportunity to really be all about you. And your supervisor is completely dedicated to supporting you in this time to be the best coach you can be. So I think really being willing to dedicate time for you. And then I think that the second piece too is being open to seeing what might show up, right? Supervision is like a discovery. I mean, you're walking through the house. It's kind of like Will said, it's you actually go in, you're inviting someone into your coaching world, right? So they're like literally there with you, with your clients, with you. Sometimes you're listening to recordings, but usually the space is so real that you're literally letting them into your world. So that does take some, I think, vulnerability and trust to believe in the process that this will show up in a way that'll discover some things that'll change your life. And that's been my experience of it. You let someone else into your world, it changes your world because they have another perspective.
Dave, can I just build on
Right.
something that Terry offered?
Certainly, yeah.
That first comment was really good. Come prepared to reflect on yourself. We learn that as coaches, be reflective. I'll also offer up kind of another caveat to that. After we've been out there coaching for a while, especially if we're coaching on our own and we're not part of a large firm or connected to other coaches, it's easy to put the reflection piece aside and discount it or shortchange ourselves by not taking time to reflect privately or with someone like a supervisor on our own practice. So I know as coaches, it's pretty often we're reflective enough that we want to add a new skill set, add an assessment, add another tool to our toolbox. One of the things that I rationally knew about supervision was when I'm ready to go deeper and reflect more about myself and about myself as a coach with me and with a supervisor, this supervision thing is going to be great. What I didn't count on was that's also a skill building thing. It's not a muscle that we flex very often as coaches. And supervision helps you flex that self-reflection, reflecting with a professional peer. And so I just think it's really, and I've seen this in others, it's easy to forget about the care and feeding of ourselves as coaches when we're out there on our own, or we've coached for a long time, or we've got the certifications we need, and the business is running smooth. Matter of fact, if business is going well, we're the last thing we focus on. So supervision really put the brakes on me ignoring myself as a coach and take a whole new perspective of self-reflection, and then using my supervision experience to really do that. Reflect with a trained supervisor. I think that as coaches, we shortchange ourselves on that enough. Supervision creates the space, as Terry said, for us to do that. And I think it's an ongoing thing to do. It's not just something to do kind of in a package and I've got that and I'm done. It's the deepest way that we reflect and develop as coaches, in my opinion. And it's something we should perpetuate and keep doing periodically.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying, or another way to say what you're expressing, Jeff, is that this is really a really profound form of self-care for coaches. That it's a way that even if we work with our own coach or coaches, even if we have, people in our lives, therapists or whatever, that this is another way to really engage in some deep self-care.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah. And I imagine that the part of that is also that it allows coaches to have more energy, more enthusiasm, more to offer the clients as they move forward.
What's more important, I think, happens is that what the coach gets out of being supervised in a supervision session turns out not to be just helpful for that client or that case or that issue. It changes who you are as a coach, and then you apply that new insight and that new learning or way of being to every client going forward, every coach situation going forward. I know this sounds a little extreme, but it's like a series of cures for the things that ail you as a coach. And once it's cured through a good supervision session, then it's cured for the next time that shows up. It's not quite that black and white or on and off, but the next time I coach a leader and his or her team, I'm going to have a much different approach of who I am as a coach based on what I learned from that Hubble telescope and that previous client case. I'm less likely to fall into that trap or that situation without recognizing it again. And that lasts and persists in the future.
Yeah, I want to build just briefly on what Jeff said is, if for anyone who's considering becoming a supervisor, you also become a better coach as you supervise others. Because, not only when I'm supervise and solve certain problems in my life, then I can pass that knowledge and wisdom onto others and recognize when it's happening in other coaches. So those are also benefits of learning to be a supervisor.
Right. Thanks, Terry. So we've just got a few minutes left. Let's open the floor up again to any questions or comments that anyone who is part of the call today might have or would like to make to any members of the panel. So questions or comments?
I'll toss one out. I was curious to know what's the general range of cost for getting a supervision coaching, and usually it's set up for 4, 5, 6 sessions, or how is it usually arranged?
One of the things that I've learned is as much as it might be easy for us to create a coaching supervision product, one of the things I learned from my supervisor is you co-create the contracting and actually the investment, the rate with the person who wants to be supervised. Yes, you may have a floor at which you won't go below, but you try to find out what the value is to them. It's not uncommon, in my understanding, for some supervisors to say, well, tell me how much you would charge for your highest rated client, the one that's most important and the most valuable to you. And is that worth the price of 1 hour of coach supervision with me? So we'll be able to kind of frame it up. How much do I charge as a coach at my highest rate for my best work with my top rated client or my target client? And then start that conversation there. I think supervisors are also good at packaging supervision. So if you want 1 session a month for 12 months, then it's probably easy to come up with a number that way. And then I think as supervisors, we also think about, well, what is our time worth? This is a really important billable hour that we have been trained and certified for, just like we were trained and certified as a coach. And so, what's the expected investment? I would have most of my supervisees paying for 1 hour of supervision with me. Those aren't the only ways to approach it, but those are ways I've learned and experienced that it might be useful to approach to help the supervisee and the supervisor co-create and decide what that will look like.
Gentlemen or Terry, anything to add on cost, duration, nature of the engagement?
So the duration, I'll talk about that because I would agree with what Jeff has said, that the general principle right now that seems to be in play in the supervision community is you pay for whatever you charge your clients, right? And I think that's just reciprocity, right? But beyond that, I would agree that it should be an ongoing process in an ideal world. You might actually try different supervisors. That's one thing I plan on doing, is to, maybe try a different supervisor every year, right? Just to get another new perspective and learn from a different person. But other people prefer to have the same supervisor for a long period of time. So I think there's not really a hard and fast rule here. This is also an evolving space. So we're all learning as we go, as we see this come forward in America, especially.
Great. I'd like to give each of the three panelists who are remaining just a moment to add a couple of closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap up. So if we could start with Damian, please.
I am a very passionate guy, and I got away my family to become coaches. And now when I went through coaching supervision, I was very passionate about coaching supervision. And I got both of my parents also to become coaching supervisors. So it's great to hear from Terry and Jeff to talk about supervision with such passion. So it was really great hearing both of you to talk about how coaching supervision makes a difference in you as coaches and as supervisor, how satisfying and gratifying is the experience. So I want to just bring that up. And thank you for inviting us and for bringing these topics for discussion so that we can be more aware and familiar with this. And we have all the resources at Jeff, Terry, and I. If anybody have any questions, you can reach us. And I hope that we can keep talking about that in the next conference next year. We can keep talking about it and doing some demonstrations and exercises around that.
I would agree. Thank you so much for taking time out from your training at Easton to be with us today, Damian. Terry, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so if you've never tried supervision, I highly recommend that you do that. And reach out to one of us, or if you know other supervisors that I would be happy to give you a demo session. And in just 30 minutes you can see the power of supervision. We did that at the ICF conference. We all helped Damian promote supervision and did complimentary sessions for people, and they were life-changing for many of the people that attended. Just in that short amount of time. So try it out for yourself if you're curious. And I think the last thing we didn't mention directly, but I do believe in the long run, supervision will be a competitive differentiator in the industry. Meaning that if you have a supervisor and you're being clearly benefiting from that process, the quality of your coaching will go up. There's just no doubt about that. And your confidence will go up. So it'll create much more confidence in you and also in your clients, knowing that you believe and practice kind of what you preach, right? And ongoing support and development.
Right, great. Thank you, Terry, and thank you for sharing your enthusiasm. And also, you sent me a couple of documents, and with your permission, I'd like to pass those on to Alan to put out on the website. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what he's referring to is the Choice magazine article that came out in the previous edition, which Gary Schleifer, of course, given him a call out, was able to publish for me, and we handed out tons of those, Gary, at the ICF conference. There were a lot of copies that went out for people. So yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. And finally, Jeff, some closing thoughts?
Sure. So yes, like Terry, it was great to be at the ICF conference and to supervise people there at the conference and let them experience. If you want to experience 30 minutes, just contact me as well. I'm happy to offer that up for GCA folks. I'm going to close with, I'm going to read 3 quotes. I've asked the 10 folks that I've supervised to describe what this experience is like, how they would define coaching supervision. So I'm going to read you I'm going to read you their words and give you their perspective of what supervision is now that they've completed 6 or 7 hours of supervision. It's an outside, helpful perspective on my coaching and my client interactions. Coaching supervision gives me a thinking partner to talk about me as a coach and my coaching business. And then coaching supervision is a great tool for those of us who have already invested in our coaching practices and skills and who want to continue to hone our craft so we can better serve our clients. I think it's really interesting to start to hear from people who have been supervised and so that they can kind of give their own words and perspective to it. So that's what I have to offer as a closing.
That's a great way to wrap things up. And Jeff, thank you so much for your passion and enthusiasm on this topic and being on part of the panel today.
My pleasure.